Hi, this is Kevin Peter Kelly. I just want to let you know, after 3 to 4 years of being taught by the angels, myself, my wife Marina, and my son Vaju are now offering healing sessions on our website, which is magicalvortex.com. We have a number of services available that may meet what you would like. In fact, a great one to try is getting a message from the angels or a crystal through my wife Marina, who can receive messages from both angels and crystals. You can customize your question or the type of message you'd like to get, and she'll get the message and type it out and send it to you. You could ask about almost anything you like that's in fairness and doesn't involve hurting another person. So check out our website, magicalvortex.com. What I'm going to talk about today is the evolution of consciousness. Evolution is not, the word is not just limited to what we call the evolution of biological beings on this planet. In fact, that isn't even nearly the most important aspect of evolution. Evolution of consciousness is by far and away the most important aspect of evolution. As you go through time in this space we call planet Earth, you go through lessons. Lessons learned, lessons not learned. Time passes either way. The evolution of consciousness does not pass either way. You see, we measure, on this planet, in this realm, we measure by time and by distance, space. In the angelic realms, time and space is non-existent. They measure in consciousness. If you are on the path of enlightenment, as I call it, then you have probably done many things to speed up your evolution of consciousness. You have moved ahead in time and the aspect that the angels and Holy Spirit view it. That's great, right? Some people, and even yourself and me, have chosen thousands of lifetimes, hundreds or thousands of lifetimes in this kind of realm, three-dimensional realm. And I would imagine we take baby steps through each life to gain that full consciousness. Because when we're in each life, we exist in two main consciousnesses. A consciousness abiding within ourself, and the human collective consciousness of that time. The human collective consciousness has a great effect on you. So, that would be the hint to say, how do I expedite my personal evolution of consciousness? Well, for one, you have to go beyond the human collective belief systems. And there's many, that's what I call belief systems. And you have to, as the angels say, walk backwards, talk backwards. And it doesn't mean really literally. It means to find your own way, to do something different, so that you can develop your own path. It goes beyond consciousness of the human collective. As you can imagine, the human collective is still taking baby steps. The human collective can't just speed up its evolution of consciousness because there's so many souls involved. There's billions. Not just the 7 billion or so that are living, but the other, how many, billions or so souls that have lived, or that are going to live again. So altogether, there's way more than 7 billion souls that make up a combination of the soul consciousness, the Anamari, and the collective human consciousness of planet Earth. Then, of course, we have a solar system consciousness, a galactic consciousness, a universal consciousness. You see? There's even an evolution of consciousness going on in the solar system, and an evolution of consciousness going on in the Milky Way galaxy. All moving forward. Now, as you probably know by now, my wife Marina and I regularly speak to the highest angels and to Holy Spirit, who is God, who is the consciousness of God, even though we are components of God. But our mind structure is here living out this illusion and having the illusionary mind we call the lower ego. And we go beyond that here and there by utilizing the mind of our heart mind, or higher self mind. We had the pleasure of speaking to a beautiful feminine energy from Venus by the name of Zioner. Zioner came to us because she said she's very close with our son, that they were sister and brother, and at least a couple of lifetimes. And they've made an arrangement, a deal, a contract, for one to look over the other when one is on planet Earth. So she said that my son has already existed on Venus, and Zioner has already existed on Earth. So you can say at that time, he was looking over her. So now she is looking over him. And we have many, many conversations with Zioner. Plus Marina often speaks to her at night and asks for assistance, more assistance, in our son's life and our son's dreams. To help him with his education and all this, things that benefit our son. So we asked Zioner, what's it like on Venus? Do you have a body? What is the evolution of consciousness there? Well, her and the angels said they have a body. Their body's more of a gel light being. She can come to planet Earth in a flash, in somewhat of a form we would call a fairy. She said if you meditate upon the flowers and have intention to see me you may begin to see me in the form of light, a light body. Well, how can she do that? How can she be in Venus and be here? Because there is no time and space, folks. There's just consciousness, ultimately. And once you go beyond the limitations of this three-dimensional realm, there's so much more that's possible. You'll speak to anyone in any dimension who's receptive, and that would mean every dimension except for this one, and then, of course, the few that are receptive here, you can speak to anytime you want in your own consciousness. You can vibrate and bilocate. Vibrate is when you take your vibration and you move it outside yourself. Bilocate is you actually replicate yourself in some way, whether in the exactness of yourself, replicated somewhere else, or in some other vibratory manifestation of yourself, like in this case where Xiner is able to manifest herself on planet Earth as, you can say, a light fairy. This is what we learned about Venus. So I asked, what dimension are you in? She said, we are in the 6th dimension and heading to the 7th dimension. That is their evolution of consciousness. The 7th dimension is the highest dimension in this galaxy. The 8th dimension exists in this galaxy, but it exists as also a gateway. So you can say the 8th dimension is here as well. And then the 8th dimension is a gateway to higher dimensions and other planes of existence and other evolutions of consciousness. So I asked Xiner and the angels, is Xiner an ascended beings? Because in Earth, we're us Lightworkers and people of the New Age are connected with this term ascended being. And what it basically means is one who has graduated the University of Three-Dimensional Life on Earth. Then you are ascended. Your consciousness has ascended to a higher plane. Right now, we are living a three-dimensional existence, but we're more and more opening to fourth-dimensional consciousness and fifth-dimensional consciousness. And many of you, in your meditations and other realizations, will touch on different planes of consciousness, sixth-dimensional, seventh-dimensional, and beyond, depending on who you are. But your everyday life, right now, you're living in three-dimension, and you're exploring fourth-dimensional consciousness. You're exploring seeing the world yourself from the bird's eye view. From a point above, you can say, or point within. You're exploring the idea that you are God. And you may be exploring the actualization, realization of that God consciousness at times. And that's beyond dimension. That's the holistic wholeness of everything. That's really expanding your evolution of consciousness. You don't have to be a light worker or a new ager. You could be someone in a religion who just feels it. Doesn't get caught in the other part of the religion that preaches guilt. It gives you doubts about your abilities, takes away your power. No, there's beauty of those religions. And I've met people who are religious, who find themselves vibrating in the state of love at times. Then there's people that are not spiritual or religious, who may go into nature and find themselves very connected with it. And then they find themselves vibrating with nature. They find themselves grounding with nature so much that they find themselves feeling one with nature. That's another way too, because nature and everything is Holy Spirit, is Source, is God. And when you connect with nature like that, you can vibrate to Source. That's a great advancement on the evolution of consciousness. There's so many ways, there's so many roads, there's no limits. In fact, you are invited to do it all in your own way. We all have a song to sing. We all have a solo in the symphony of existence. It's up to you to stand up and play your solo anytime you like. And that will be celebrated. That's what the grand consciousness is waiting for. Not for you to follow. It's not. Walking the path of enlightenment. One who's walking the path to save themselves. How do I know this? Because he told us exactly. Simon Peter, the rock. And I had asked Simon Peter. Well, I had stated. I said, Peter, and then Jesus and Malachi, of course, are there, all in consciousness. They say that you are the one who guards the pearly gates into heaven, and you are the one who judges. And then I said, I don't believe that. I said, I believe they call you the rock, or Jesus called you the rock. And that's how he will build his foundation, his church, upon the rock. And then I said, I realize that what Jesus was referring to you as is someone who embodied the knowledge that he had given you about the human body's pineal gland, also known as the philosopher's stone. That it's the pineal gland who guards the gates of heaven. The pineal gland that has light receptors, similar to the human eye. But it's inside the body, inside the mind, inside the brain, I should say, where there should be no light. Why would it have light receptors? Why? Because it's receiving the greater light. It's receiving God. It's receiving the Source, which is the greater light, which is love, when it is activated. And that is when you have finished walking the path of enlightenment, when you have graduated from the university, when you have ascended into the stone, the rock, the philosopher's stone, the one that Jesus was referring to when he was talking about St. Peter. Do you see? That is the evolution of consciousness. They talk about in the Bible about the 7 seals, the 7 steps. This represents the evolution of consciousness. Each chakra embodying, housing lessons of the soul, lessons of the being, karmic patterns. We all must graduate from each chakra, the personal chakras, the 7 chakras, to then activate our philosopher's stone. Turn objects into gold. Well, that has a symbology too. Gold is truly the purest essence of Holy Spirit manifested into material form. You see, that gold is, you can say, God, the manifestation of the truest source of God. That's why you can't damage it. It doesn't rust or rot, decay, deteriorate. It's gold. It's golden. See, this is all about the evolution, the evolution of consciousness. When Saint Germain, Joseph, came to me and asked me to write 5 books, 5 volumes, and the series of volumes is called, he named it, Life Versions. At the time, I didn't quite get it. You know, of course I say, yeah, okay, different versions of life. Different versions of life. But now I really get it. Each stepping stone of consciousness brings you into a different version of life. In fact, amongst the geography of this planet, we live different versions of life. Travel, and you will feel it. You'll feel the difference. I even feel the difference when I go to New York. They're living a different version, slightly different version of life than I am here in California. Well, some will say in some ways they have this great work ethic there. They're not lazy. They get things done. Some will say in California, there's much more of an open-minded essence here. The awareness is greater. But then, not always carrying that strong East Coast work ethic. So New York has been a place of dog-eat-dog, existence and survival from its inception. And as we know, many people come from different countries to Ellis Island and they settle in New York. And they have to survive there. There's a different consciousness level there. Not necessarily higher or lower, just a different. Now, when you go to these war-ridden places, like parts of the Middle East, and now in Ukraine, Nigeria, just different places in Northern Africa, again, you have a different state of consciousness, a different version of life, a life version in the same time as the life version you're living. I mean, as a version of life that you're living, the same time. But they're dealing with a whole different evolution of consciousness. That's why it's good not to get engaged in the news. You don't need to be engaged into their pattern of karma, into their evolution of consciousness. Chances are, if you're not living there, you have already passed that class and moved on to another classroom, and that's your classroom. Do they need to be concerned in those countries, in those places, about your classroom and whatever you're dealing with? No, they don't. But theirs is on the news because theirs is about killing, and of course the news is constantly bringing about killing. Why is that? Because they want to suck you in. They want you to bring you back. Did you ever hear of people being left back in school? Well, they want you to be left back. Get you back into that warring consciousness. The consciousness of separation, consciousness of I am better, consciousness of the haves, the have-nots. And as George Bush Jr. jokingly put it, the have-mores. Don't get engaged. Give them love, give them prayers, give them blessings. Give them insight, if they ask. The only way out of these wars, of these battles, whether it be in these countries, whether it be with weapons, bombs, or whether it be family feuds, business battles, battles between neighbors. There's only one way out. And that is through the gateway of peace, the gateway of forgiveness, a gateway of cooperation, the gateway of oneness, of seeing others as the one consciousness. Yeah, but he did this and she did that. I need to teach him a lesson. I need to make them pay. Well, think about where that mindset falls on, let's say, the stairway of the evolution of consciousness. You could be on a high step and they get caught up in that behavior, in that mindset, and find yourself stepping back and then living out karmic patterns to resolve that. You see? Then you didn't truly own it, did you? You didn't really truly own the consciousness of peace yet, did you? What is the last straw for you? The last straw that breaks the camel's back? What is it for you? You may meditate each day. You may walk the world in peace. But while you're in a store, if somebody thinks you looked at them in the wrong way, I've had this happen in New York. People are very, some people are very touchy there, and they're like, hey, what are you looking at, huh? This kind of thing. I've had this happen. And all of a sudden you might have this person eye to eye with you about to punch you in the nose. For no reason, maybe. What is the straw that's going to break your back? It's going to break your level of peace. What if that person smacks you in the face? Do you give them the other cheek, as it said in the Bible that Jesus said? Do you keep your peace? Or can you keep your peace and make boundaries and decisions that are done peacefully? You can defend yourself, folks. You don't have to be a doormat. You have to create boundaries. And somebody hitting you, well, that's breaking the boundaries. So let's say you get hit. You step back. And you offer peace. Say, look, I don't want any fighting or trouble. But if you're going to do this again, there will be serious repercussions. Whatever. Even if you're half the size. In that case, the serious repercussions will be suing the person, having them arrested. Whatever it might be. You're in peace, but you're creating boundaries. You see, we're on this world of earth, and we're dealing with not the activated I am presences of everybody's individual, of all the individuals that we deal with. We're dealing with egos. So you can't just walk around la-di-la-di-la, everything is peaceful, and put up the two fingers and say, peace, man. Yeah, that was a wonderful philosophy the hippies and people of the 60s and 70s were putting out. They felt it. But why did we get entrenched back into the material world? Because we have to own it. We can't just intellectualize peace and love, harmony, and think we own it. You own it when you live it. You own it when you live it by example. You own it when you live it by situation that in another time brought you out of peace. Who in your life irritates you? Well, realize that person has a contract with you to do so. And they will continue to do so for the rest of your life. Unless you stop getting irritated by what they're doing, their behavior, and what they say. Then they'll stop. Because that's the contract. You irritate this person until they stop getting irritated. Sign here. They sign there. And you sign there as a receptor of that, receiver of that. You see, folks? It's the evolution of consciousness. When you stop getting irritated, that person becomes something else in your life, or just goes away. And all of a sudden, that person becomes maybe a joyful aspect of your life. And you don't have to talk about what you did, how you irritated me. It was all done for a reason. And now you move on. You graduated. Wear the graduation cap and be happy. And know that they fulfilled their contract. And they have benefited for it as well. Especially if they realized that their contract was over and they stopped the irritation, the agitation. This is how things get resolved. It's the same in these battles. These actual violent battles. Much more serious, yes, but driven by the same aspect. The double contract. The Israelis have a contract with the Palestinians and maybe other, at this time, Muslim people in the area, sometimes Christian, to irritate, in this case to kill, to inflict violence. Palestinians and other peoples have the contract to give it back. You see, in this case, both have a contract to irritate, to hurt, to inflict. But it's the one who will first walk through the gateway of peace, cooperation, and harmony in truth, in reality. Who will be the winner? Yes, of course, Israel has this mighty might of weaponry, often given to them by the United States. But you know what? They can win by using all that and killing a massive amount of people. And the physical win would be a tremendous loss for that country and the people who are patriotic and love it. People who support it, I mean. Because they will be set back. Into almost ancient karmic patterns if they did that. And they will have to live that out. And many of those peoples have lived out misery. We know that. The Holocaust, for instance. They've lived out some of the toughest lives ever lived. Can they please find peace? Can they please step into that gateway? You know, I always wondered, all these new people of Israel who mostly come from Europe, Russia, parts of even Central Asia, parts of Eastern and Western Europe, parts of Africa. But the ones that come from Europe, I always wonder, are these the real people that were born in Israel? I mean, that lived at the time of Jesus in this land called Judea, Palestine, whatever it was called back then? Or is it really the Palestine people who are the people who were once Jews who lived at the time of Jesus? And are the new Israelites actually Sumerians that David Icke says were exiled, like a whole bunch of them, like 1 million people, out of Samaria, and then formed a country called Khazar and became Khazarians? And then I think there was a king who at one point, none of them were Jewish at all. And it might have been around 750 AD. You look it up. I do these discourses in the jacuzzi, so I have no facts in front of me. But he then said, everyone in this country is Jewish now. Then those people were a great warring nation. Those people were hired by other nations at the time, other tribal nations as well, to fight wars. These Khazars would go on to rule the world. What? Who rules the world? Nobody rules the world. Well, look it up. The people who control the central banking systems and the money of the world mostly rule the world. I'm not saying 100%. Mostly, or have ruled the world. And I'm thinking the power of that is lessening as we're going deeper into this age that we've just entered, the age of Aquarius, which is wonderful. In other words, they were playing without an opponent, and now there's a beautiful opponent of light, of love, with help of the angels playing a role in this. You see this evolution of consciousness here. Well, these that, became Jewish, so they are Jewish. I mean, now they've been practicing the religion for 1,300 years or so, whatever it is. Yeah, so they're Jewish. I'm not saying they're not Jewish, but they're not mostly the people that lived in that land. They're not. The Semitic people, it's funny you say, oh, that person's anti-Semitic. Well, Semitic people are the Palestinian people. The bloodline of the original Jewish people and what we call the Palestine Muslim people today are the same. The same people. They're the same lineage. I don't remember when the Muslim religion started. I think it was like 500 AD. So it took a while for these people that stayed in Israel or Judea, in that land, to even change. They weren't Muslim even 200 years after Christ. There was no Muslim yet. Muhammad, I believe, existed around 500 AD. Please look these things up. I'm in a jacuzzi. I don't have any facts in front of me. But you get the idea. They became Muslim way later. So now you have this irony where you have these new Jewish people coming in who were not mostly the people that lived in this land, fighting with Muslim people who were once the original Jewish people. And keep in mind that some of those original Jewish people may have converted to Christianity and then to Muslim. And probably a lot has to do with who was ruling at the time. Whatever, the Ottoman Empire and different Muslim, Islamic empires that converted these people to be Muslim. Remember, there was this time of the, I forget what they call it, the Holy War. Anyway, you had Richard the Lionhearted, I think, in 1100 AD. Trying to fight, Jerusalem, trying to take back Jerusalem. You had the Knights Templar in the 1300s, 1200s, trying to fight and take back Jerusalem. And sometimes they would get it for a while and then lose it. The Crusades, that's what they call it, the Crusades, where the Christian people are trying to take back the Holy Land from the Muslim people. So you see, this has been going on. And it's only recent, and it's still going on, because it's only been since 1948, I believe, that Israel's birth and conception materialized. You see? Yes, England had already controlled it, so I don't know when England actually controlled Palestine. You have to look that up. But it was much before 1948. So you can say that's when, the Christian crusaders would have won the battle and taking back Jerusalem and that land from the Muslim empire at this time. And then the English would then really give it to Israel. Hey, do you know who Israel wanted as their first president? They asked Albert Einstein to be their first president. And you know what he said? I don't know the exact words, but he says something like, I am the person of the mind. My endeavor is to always speak the truth. So how could I possibly be the president? Or go into any politics, for that matter. I'm not saying only presidents of Israel don't speak the truth. It's all presidents. Come on. It's just an interesting piece of information. You can look a lot of this up. David Icke is the leading historian in this type of information that I've ever read. And I'm not saying he is the only one, but that I've ever read. There's historians and there's historians. And what I mean by that, you say, oh, I'm an historian of religious studies and, ancient lands. Well, those people are basically reiterating what the authority structure of those times wrote down to be history. That's not history, it's his story and his lies. History, folks, the real history comes from digging, walking backwards, thinking back. Mainstream historians, and then you can say alternative historians. And David Icke is a wonderful alternative historian. Graham Hancock, I believe his name is, who wrote The Footprints of God and many other books, is another great historian walking backwards. Alex Jones is a great historian, but also a great current affairs person, a reporter of the truth. I just always ask, just don't take it in fear when you listen to that, because you're being bombarded by the truth. And if you're not ready for the truth, it's scary. What these people do, the people that are in control, what they've done. Don't engage in it. It's not your karma. Your karma is exactly what's in front of you right now. That's your evolution of consciousness. Yeah, they did terrible things. Yeah, they've kidnapped kids. They've done sexual things to them. They've hung up people and pierced them and let their blood fall on top of them. In orgy situation. I mean, you just name it. And David Icke and other people have brought this to your attention. You don't need to know those details that are out there. I don't really care. In the sense that if you focus on them, you could bring yourself down in your consciousness level and feel powerless. Your general focus, your main focus has to be a focus, peace, love. Knowing that that was a karmic pattern that went through, as bad as it was. As bad as things are still happening in the world. But folks, there are people waking up every day. The world is tilting more and more towards the light every day. We're not 2/3 there yet, folks. But every day we get closer. And it's not a matter of time. It's a matter of consciousness when we get there. We might have made a big leap in the last 5 years, but the next 5 years might be just an inch. Or it might be 3 times that leap. It all depends on consciousness. It all depends. Do we keep on fighting these battles in our own selves, with our own friends and family, in our businesses, in our neighborhoods? And do we keep on fighting these battles of violence in this world? Then those patterns have to keep on being recreated. It's the only way out. Peace, the doorway of peace, the gateway of harmony, gateway of forgiveness, of cooperation, of love, and of seeing oneness. I didn't think I had anything to say today, but now it's 50 minutes. And I guess the evolution of consciousness is probably the most important thing I've talked about. This is my longest discourse. You know, I didn't even know what I was going to talk about, and I just went through my meditation, and then I grabbed my recorder, and didn't have anything to talk about. And I was like, okay, let me ask Saint Germain, and I went in my meditation again and asked Saint Germain, and it came up, evolution of consciousness. Still didn't know what I was going to talk about, and I just turned on the recorder and started talking. And 15 minutes came out. So, understand the importance of understanding the evolution of consciousness. You can evolve right through those pearly gates, which is actually the gates way to your pineal gland, and be ascended anytime. Because time is not what it's all about. It's all about the evolution of consciousness. And I am Kevin Peter Kelly, helping you and assisting you on your path of the evolution of consciousness.